All right, so here we are. We're Exodus, Shemot, chapter 18, and I think we read through 5. Is that where we were? So I'm going to continue reading a little bit here, and then we can have some discussion. And when he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Jethro rejoiced for all the good the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people." And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. All right. Thoughts, questions? All right, right over here, Byron.
In verse 1, who is Jethro's the priest of Midian? Who's he a priest for, or what God? That's question number 1. Now, question number 2 is related to that, and it's down in 11 and 12, where it looks like Jethro's having a conversion experience, because he starts to he offers the God that Moses. He's excited about what happened with Moses, and then he offers that God, Adonai, worship. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's generally understood that he was an idolater, that he was just like who he was a priest for, we don't know, but it wasn't God, and that essentially this represents conversion experience. He's coming in the covenant. That's what we're seeing here with the meal and Israel. With the elders of Israel and Moses before God eating a meal, that's like the consummation of the covenant. It is true that there's not we don't see an animal cut in half and this whole thing. That's not all described, but it talks about burnt offerings and sacrifices and stuff, so we can understand that that's inferred. So yeah, so we see him coming into covenant, and conversion is a good word. Anybody else? Any other thought? Okay, Abigail?
It's interesting that it says that Jethro says that the Lord is greater than all gods. It doesn't say that the other gods aren't real, or they aren't still gods. It just says that he's greater than them, which is interesting.
I agree. And there's a lot of theology out there about that thought, and actually whether God actually appointed lesser gods or deities to rule over various parts of the earth and things like this, and if they became the demons and whatever.
It could have also been because if he was a priest of some other god, then he was I don't know, he could have still thought that God had power, but that Adonai was just higher.
Right. It's actually, so the way that people thought about things back then is very different than the way at least Westerners think about things now. So that's very possible, right? That he was just saying, hey, God is great. So he's like, hey, I'm going to worship the greater God, right? so should we all. Okay, Daniel.
I think it's interesting that Jethro is now having this experience of saying, now I believe that your God is, a powerful God because we're greater than all the other gods. Moses lived with him for like 40 years, right? Like, and there wasn't a conversion experience in those 40 years. So now, 40 years plus, now he's having this experience. It could also have been, there's a couple of plausible explanations for why Zipporah could have known about circumcision. Obviously Moses, and there's various reasons why, but she did seem to know in that very odd interaction that, maybe I should just circumcise my son. That'll save Moses real quick. And so it's possible that they were exposed to the theology of knowing about God because, I would imagine, it wasn't that many generations removed from Noah and everything that had gone on in that way. So, well, there was idolatry, obviously, and he could have known about God. So there's a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, and probably Moses talked about it, And I think this also, okay, right in the back, Cohen, see, Ralph, straight back. So one, he probably talked about it, right? Because who are you? Where are you from? Who are your gods? Like, who are your people? All this kind of stuff. And so he probably talked about it. The other thing is, it's interesting that even after speaking about it, being in relationship with Moses for 40 plus years, Yitro's not, coming to God, but after the miracle, right? Obviously, we don't rely on miracles for like conversion, and most of the time, quite frankly, if you need a miracle to believe in God, the faith is fairly shallow. But it seems like this was kind of the culmination of everything, right? Where it was not a one-off thing, but like he's like, okay, well, I took all these things together, and given what Adonai just did to the gods of Egypt and to Pharaoh and all the people, then now I know he's the greatest for sure.
I think Jethro uses the word gods because there's really no other way to express who those people, who they were praying to, without being disrespectful. So gods wasn't recognizing them as God, it was being respectful to the people that did have other gods.
Yeah. That's a good perspective. Another? If you're raising your hand, raise it high. All right, Jonathan over here, and then we got Claude.
So it says that he rejoiced when he heard all this, and most people would not be very, very excited about switching when they've been doing this thing for 40 plus years. So what I think is happening is the fact that he's being tortured by all the gods he's worshiping, and he wants a way out. And after hearing all this and having lived with Moses and seeing no sign of torture from him, he wants a way out.
So where do we see, do you see that in the text anywhere? The torture part, or are you just saying that he's just recognizing that it's so much better to serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Okay.
Well, this, I was thinking about the comment, why did he wait so long, Jethro, to his conversion? What made him convert? He knew Moses really well for 40 years. Moses was a sheep herder, right? So he goes to see this guy now, who he known for 40 years. He's headed all these million people. Wait a minute, what's going on here? So that might have sparked something in him to say, he's really changed. What's giving him the ability to do this? I'm just saying that Moses changed a lot, being that the backside of the hill, desert, being a sheep herder, to a leader of 1,000,000+ people. I get the feeling that might have. There's no scripture to back it up, but I'm just speculating.
Okay, yeah. So transformation in Moses' life was part of the. Okay, all right, Cohen, other side over here. See Erica. Hurry, go quick.
I looked it up real quick, and it doesn't look like we fully know who the Midianites worshipped at that point. So, or who Jethro was a priest of. It's kind of, I mean, it says that maybe they did worship the God of Israel. Later, they're associated with Baal, Peor, and Ashtoreth. Some say that they worshipped everybody. They just were like, okay, we're just gonna God of Israel and all these Egyptian guys, like everybody. So I don't know. Well, they're all the descendants of Abraham through Keturah. That's interesting. So they would know about the God of Israel.
Yes. So my thought is that we see this conversion experience going on, and so if they were worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob already, then that would have not been necessary. And so so it seems like maybe he was just a priest of whatever. I don't know. I think it was probably someone other than Adonai, based on the text.
Shed some light on that.
Can we turn it up a little? It's hard for me to hear when they're in the back. It's a little quiet. Thank you.
Maybe this shed some light on this, but later on with Balaam and Balak, the Midianites are used as a way, like through pagan worship, they are used as a distraction and actually a way to get to Israel, to bring Israel down. So likely that, unless they reconverted to paganism, that they didn't have a full conversion, and that also they were in some way worshiping in a pagan way, so that it was a destructive thing to Israel. Because later on, then they have to go and take out Midian and fight against Midian. So
yeah, and I think
that clears things up.
And I think it's important to notice that Jethro is not the king of Midian, right? He's a priest, maybe a high-ranking priest, but he's a priest, and it's not synonymous, right? So it seems to be that this is like Jethro and his household rather than a national change. All right, Lisa, Cohen, see you.
I was just going to mention, getting back to Moses, sharing all the things that God had done and that causing Jethro to have a change of heart. I think it's just a reminder to us that regardless of, I guess, who we're talking to share what God's doing in our life. It can be so life-changing for someone. So I'm guilty of that. I share with people who know God. I share with people, but I'm always sharing with people who need to hear it in a different way, as a reminder to them that God loves them and God does work in our lives and He is real.
Oh, all right. Richard, and then we're going to move on.
I see this story as an example of how important it is for us to live our lives daily as an example of a living Torah. And Jethro saw Moses' reaction and how he led the people selflessly through the desert. And Jethro saw the example of his son-in-law's life and the miracles that God performed. And then Jethro had really no choice. His heart he was already a priest, so he was already inclined to worship these idols and false gods. But when he saw the example of Moses' life and what God had done in his life and Moses' reaction, so this basically is an example for us. How do we live our lives every day that people can see what we're doing, what we're about, so that they can be drawn to the living God through our actions, through our words, and great example that Moses did and that Jethro followed.
Amen. All right, let's continue. Exodus 18, verse 13. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. And when they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good." I would think, what do you mean it's not good? I'm helping these guys out. Okay, so what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, I will give you advice, and God will be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from among all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men from out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. All right. All right, Claude, and then we'll come to Matt.
This part of Scripture demonstrates how humble Moses was as a man. I mean, he could have easily said, "Who are you telling me what to do? I'm the one who led these people out of Egypt, not you." But he understood that this man who just had a recent conversion was giving him some sound advice, and he listened.
Take this in a different direction. God's ways are not our ways. Praise God for that. His ways are higher than our ways. He is the only one that gets to decide what is tov and what is ra, what is good and what is bad. And here we have Jethro defining what is good and what is bad, telling Moses that what he's doing is not good. I've heard it taught, some rabbinic teaching, that in addition to striking the rock when he was supposed to speak to it, this was actually a graver sin that Moses committed by placing the word of man above the word of God. This was an appointed task that was given to Moses that he was supposed to do, right? Ordained by God to handle this responsibility, and on the word of man, he passed that off.
You are stirring the pot. All right. Okay, Richard.
It's so easy for us men to want to be in control. And we take things on and we go, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I did this and I did that. Well, quite frankly, not one of us is a self-made man. That is a lie from the pit of hell. And Moses, it's not explicitly described here that he was a control freak, but he did take it upon himself because he knew that God had ordained him to lead the people out of Israel. So he naturally took it upon himself. And Jethro rightly saw that, you know what, you're not in control. You must relinquish control, because otherwise people who try and control things all the time, that will be their downfall. And Jethro saw this. If you try to continue to be in control, you will fall, you will fail. Such a wise word from a man who was an idolater, but God put that wisdom into his heart. Not one of us is a self-made man. Not one.
All right. Claude?
Need your help in finding, it's a proverb to talk about in the counsel of many there is wisdom. I'm not sure what Proverbs it is.
Yeah, in
So it is biblical to seek advice.
the multitude of counselors, there's safety. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying there is a biblical principle.
Okay. Erica?
Yeah, logically, I mean, Moses is standing around from morning until evening. It says, we already know he had a bit of a temper from later. I mean, imagine doing that day after day after day. I think he would have struck that rock or something else a lot sooner if he'd just been standing around all day listening to these people, kvetch at him. So I think Jethro, I mean, if Jethro was a priest, he had, even if he was an idolatrous priest, he had experience with people and probably in leadership and directing. He was older, so I think he had wisdom here. He told him, because I would have done the same thing that Moses is doing, just standing there, someone would have had to also tell me, hey, you might actually just kill yourself accidentally, just standing here being stupid.
So I'm gonna leverage Matt's point here. Is the wisdom of Jethro supersede the position of Moses, and that God had appointed him, and what do we think of this idea of Moses potentially misstepping by taking Jethro's advice ostensibly over what God had said? Okay, Hannah, raise your hand. Keep it high.
Is there anywhere that says that God told him to judge the people? He was to lead the people out of Israel. He maybe God did. I'm not saying he didn't. Is there somewhere where God said that? Because we don't know that he was given complete authority. Also, it does say that Moses was, doesn't it say he was most humble man? That's humility for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to come to Matt, and then we'll go back to Tevin. All right.
I would say that, to me, the hint for this is found in verse 16 when he says, whenever they have a dispute, it comes to me. I judge between one person and another, and I explain to them God's laws and teachings. So effectively what Moses is doing is he's not judging between one person and another. He's just the conduit that relays God's teachings and God's laws to these people. So it's ultimately God who is doing the judging and doing the teaching. Moses is just the conduit for that.
Next question. Okay. Let's do Tevin in the back, and then we'll come up to Erica. So now the next question is Moses the only one who God can speak through or work through? Which we probably have to come back to that. Okay, Tevin.
Comment. Who knows that, like, God doesn't send Jethro, to console Moses. Who knows? Like, it's not God, right? Sometimes God sent people you wouldn't know him.
Keep it by your mouth so I can hear you. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So you guys heard that?
So who, maybe God sent Jethro.
Yeah,
right?
maybe God
How do we know God
Jethro
didn't
to
send
help
Jethro?
Moses out.
Okay.
Who knows?
Cool. All right. Next is Erica.
Verse 23 does say, if you do this thing as God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people will go to their places in shalom.
Okay.
And there's no indication later that God was mad at Moses for this, or that they disobeyed because of anything. Because Jethro was very clear, like, pick good people who hate bribes, things like
Right.
that. So it says as God commands you.
Right? Okay. All right, real quick, we'll go to Claude and then back up to Matt.
I'm thinking more aligned to the New Testament when Paul talks about all getting certain gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking on those lines because, yeah, he let people out. I think somebody talked about him not really being important to be a judge, but these other elders, they might be what kind of people that Paul was alluding to that had a better gift of judging perhaps than Moses. So
Okay.
I'm just saying that I still say it's biblical what he did.
Okay. And maybe Jethro has the gift of administration, right? And he's helping Moses out. Okay, your dad. Bring it to your dad.
So, to what Erica was saying, different translations sort of present it differently. In verse 23, for me, it says, Jethro says, if you do this, and God is directing you to do it. So it's a question in Jethro's mind. It's not even a this is happening. God is directing you to do it. It's if you do this, and God is directing you to do it, then X, Y, Z. Robin chimed in with a text, with a thought, and
Okay.
and I
Hi,
think
Robin.
it's a fair point.
All right.
She says this kind of relates to how the Israelites wanted a king, and yet God wanted to be their only king, and he allowed it to take place,
Which
to the-
part, though? Because is Moses sitting here, is he in the place of a king? Oh, we're hearing, okay, here no. Why no? Because to me, I'm just saying, like, he's the single authority. Like, okay, yes, I'm ruling for God, but what is to keep Moses from saying, God just told me you are to give me all of your every goat that you've got, every bronze coin or gold coin or something. So how is Moses not acting in the place of a king in this scenario? Okay, going all the way over here, Nick. Run. There you go.
Good morning. So I have a couple thoughts, and maybe I'm understanding this incorrectly, but Moses left Egypt because two Israelites were arguing over him trying to be a judge between the two of them. And that's what alerted him to the fact that, hey, the secret of me killing this man is out, and so now I need to flee. So he's already had a history of him kind of being this judge, and it didn't land well with the Israelites. And so I think he had wonderful wisdom from his father-in-law to say, what you're doing might not be the best, and you've seen this before. And then secondly, if everybody comes to him, it's almost a replacement theology. As the Israelites, they come to him to settle their disputes when they should be coming to God. And maybe that's what he was doing as a conduit. At the same time, it can give this false ideology, almost like in Catholicism, where you have to go to the priest to ask for forgiveness or get your penance or whatever it is they do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
just some thoughts on it.
So he's kind of becoming a stand-in for going directly to Shem, right? I'm really enjoying this conversation because it goes very well with what I'm going to share in a little bit. So this is good.
Well, hopefully my comment doesn't derail that then.
That's okay.
If we are going, and if we're hearing this translation that Matt just read to us, there is instruction in that to also consult God.
Right.
So if that was the actual advice, or at least a good chunk of the advice, is you should be consulting God. I don't necessarily think that it's incorrect to follow that advice if you first consult God.
So, go ahead.
Yes, and in verse 24, it doesn't say that he paid attention to God's counseling or instructions. It said he paid attention to his father-in-law, right? He listened to his counsel as opposed to God's.
So there's a leadership lesson in this whole thing. There's a lot of leadership lessons in this whole thing, but one lesson, it doesn't matter if you're, leading one person or I presume, 1,000 or a nation. Doesn't matter what you do, people are going to have opinions about it, even years later, as to whether you did the right thing. And because here we are talking about Moses, whether this is the right thing. Okay, Cohen, over here, go back to Daniel, if you would. There you go. Good job.
That was rush shipping for that one. So I think there's a couple of there's a couple of interesting things where God seems to allow certain things to happen, but even though they're a human institution or something along those lines, like Elijah calls for a drought, and it doesn't seem like God specifically has him call for a drought. It seems like Elijah initiates that, and then God honors that and goes with, it happens that way. And then a similar thing here in this situation. This kind of reminds me of that situation where something was instituted by humans, and seemingly same thing goes with the king later on, where God basically, in knowing the end from the beginning, says, well, there's going to be a king. You're going to want a king at some point. You're going to ask for this. And then these are the rules associated with that. And you have to, if you're going to have a king, it has to be in this way and that sort of thing. So even though it's imperfect, I think there are these things that are imperfect, like even laws regarding slavery and various different things that are known imperfections. Even later on in Leviticus, reading, about things that priests that are excluded from different service and stuff like that, those are known imperfections that theoretically God could choose to, miraculously fix or in some way change. He doesn't intervene in that, seemingly, and still allows that to play out. And I think that there's, just something to observe from that, where there are certain times in the Bible where God seemingly does intervene and there's no stopping it, in just a couple of those spots. But most of the time it seems like things play out, and it's one of those, there are responses afterwards, but there's still an allowance for free will. And I think in this case, this was one of those kind of free will type situations, and things could, happen past that point.
Okay, Erica and then Guard. Guard, yeah, Guard first, then Erica, I think that's how it happened. All right.
So I'm just trying to connect some loose dots maybe here. I'm just kind of thumbing through forward in Exodus. There's not much else said about these men after they're being appointed by Moses. In particular, these men. But as you go forward, then you have the golden calf afterwards. And reading through, I believe it's Moses or it is God that says that the people were, so 32 verse 25 says, when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained because Aaron had let them run wild to become a joke among the enemies, Moses stood at the gate of the camp and said, whoever is on Adonai's side, let him come to me. And at the start of the chapter, these men are appointed judges, essentially leaders over people, and yet these people are still going to Moses. Moses is still the head consultant of everybody, because they go to Aaron and say, wherever this Moses guy is that let us out of here, he's gone. So set up gods who will go before us. Where are these men, appointed judges? They're non-existent now.
I think that speaks to their role. Their role is as a arbitrator, right? They're judging between one person and another. They're not necessarily the police, right? And so their role, it appears, has been to try to keep peace between individual parties, not necessarily to police society.
I guess the correlation I was trying to make here was even later when the tabernacle was being built. So these men seemingly were not appointed by God. They were appointed by Moses at the advice of his father-in-law. But the two, and that, like at least from what I'm looking at, didn't appear to be a good thing. But then you go forward when God appoints the 2 men over the construction of the tabernacle. That is a good thing, and God is the one who appointed them, and they did a good work by his command.
So okay, Erica's next over here. So so is it a good thing that he appointed these judges?
So
Okay,
it's not like there were only a handful of these people. I mean, leaders of like tens and fifties and thousands. So there were how many Israelites were let out?
Well, anywhere from 600,000 to over 2 million.
So this was not like a small like cabal of people that were just like conspiring. They were the people as well. Like they were amongst the people. And when it says that Moses listened to his father-in-law, did everything that he said, well, Jethro was very clear. You need to, the first thing he says is, well, yes, consult God. He says, may God be with you. He tells him, may God be with you in the Amplified to confirm my advice. So, and then he gives all these very, very good descriptions of these men, you know. So if it says that Moses did everything that Jethro said, well, part of that would be consulting God and getting confirmation and God being with him.
All right. Nick. Where's Cohen? All right. There you go.
Okay, so before I started coming to this church, I didn't really think to look for Christ in the Old Testament. So I wanna try to use that lens, and maybe you can help us look to see where Christ is in this picture. If Moses took the people out of bondage and slavery and brought them into freedom, and then he surrounded himself around a council of godly men, they sought God first. Isn't that kind of an illustration of what Jesus did years later? I mean, do you see a shadowing or a foreshadowing of Christ in this?
Yes. So I'm trying to decide when do I jump in with my thing, like cat ready to pounce here. And this isn't. And I'm going to say that what I'm going to say isn't my wisdom. I've got it. I'll tell you who I got it from. But
Okay, so to come off of Nick, the 12 disciples were not perfect. They failed, right? And then they got their act together afterwards. Same thing with these men that Moses picked out. Even though they were godly men, they're still men. And yes, they failed. But it says here, furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So, yes, he did pick out these people, and it doesn't say this, but pretty much it's right there. I mean, he looked to God to pick out godly men. That's how you do it, right? It probably took him, it didn't take him just overnight to do this, right? I mean, like Erica picked out, there's 2 million people here, maybe more, right? And so it take a while to get all of that. Plus, the other thing is that we're all talking as if these people knew the Torah. There was no Torah at the time. It wasn't written yet, right? So they're coming to Moses to try to figure out, because Moses is the man of God, he's the leader. They're trying to figure out, okay, how are we supposed to run this society here? How are we supposed to do things? And that's the thing that I think we need to keep in mind too, is this is what they're doing. So Jethro, seeing all of this, says, to be efficient and to serve these people, like God is telling you to serve these people, you need to do it more efficient. You're never going to get to you're not going to get 2 million people, spending all day, morning to evening. So that's my.
Okay, Claude, last comment, and then we'll kind of bring it home.
It sounds like a lot of pastors I know that in small churches, they're doing everything. What happens? They get burned out. And I mean, probably not what you were thinking about, but I was thinking, I know a lot of pastors in small churches because they're doing everything, no help, and they get burned out.
It's true. One person can only handle so much. So, so I didn't. No, I won't tell you what I didn't do. We'll just go on the positive side. So, so this whole conversation. So this is very interesting because when I was preparing for this exchange, I was trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to talk? We always, I wouldn't say we don't always talk about the same thing. And my mind always goes in the same places when I come to this Parsha and this portion of Scripture. And I've read different commentaries and essays and all this kind of stuff. And there was something that came to my inbox. It was by Rabbi Paul Saul. He's a Messianic rabbi in West Hartford, Connecticut, Congregation Shuva Yisrael. And you can read this for yourself, the entire thing, if you go to umjc.org/commentary. It's called A Perfect Government. And I think, so what I'm going to share is essentially a kind of amalgamation of his perspective and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory. And so I'm going to do my best to summarize this a little bit, but I'm going to come on the side of that it was a good thing that Moses did this, that he delegated. Sorry, man. So because of several different reasons. So one is that Rabbi Saul brings out this point that there's this transformation that Israel is going through of authority. What authority are they going to respond to? Are they going to be under? Are they going to respect? And when they're in Egypt, the authority is harsh. It's dictatorial. There's no choosing. There's only really it's slavery, right? I didn't decide any of this, and I'm not agreeing to any of this. It's brute force, and it's the really might makes right. Okay, and so this Pharaoh is presenting himself as having the power of death. Really do this, or we'll kill you and we'll punish you in the process. And I'm gonna cite Rabbi Saul. He says the God of Israel reveals himself differently, not as a tyrant, but as the source of life, blessing, and meaning. Redemption, therefore, is not the abolition of authority, but its transformation. Israel is redeemed from Pharaoh in order to come to Sinai and willingly accept the sovereignty of the one to whom all creation already belongs. Okay, so there's this transition, this transformation of being under tyrant authority, dictatorial power authority, and the authority of God Almighty, who really holds all power, all authority. And so we have, they're on their way at this point. They have not gotten to the point where God is appearing at Sinai yet. As far as we can tell, it's possible that this is out of chronological order, but it's been placed here before Sinai intentionally by God. So they come, and really, Moses is an archetype of Yeshua, right? He's the deliverer. He's the redeemer. He's the one who comes, and God uses this single man to deliver the entire nation. And in the case of Messiah Yeshua, it's not just the nation, but ultimately the world, right? Obviously the nation first, but then it goes, to the Jew first, but also to the Gentile. So So Moses is archetypical of the Messiah, and he's giving himself. And here's the thing: is that Moses is sitting here, and he's doing the best he can. I think that Moses has good intentions. I think that he's trying to fulfill the calling and the position that God has put upon his life, and he's doing really the best that he can. And it's interesting, as Nick brought up, that he was acting as a judge before this point, right? 40 plus years earlier, and really it's kind of in a lot of ways who he is. And the point that Rabbi Saul makes is that I'm just gonna read more. He says it very well. I don't need to summarize it. It says, authority among God's people cannot mirror Pharaoh's model, even in subtler form. Leadership must be distributed, entrusted to others who fear God, love truth, and reject unjust gain. Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael notes that Yitro rejoiced not merely at Israel's escape from Egypt, but also at the good God did for them in bringing them toward the Torah. In other words, Yitro understands that freedom without covenant is fragile, and covenant without shared responsibility is unsustainable. Before Israel can stand at Sinai as a kingdom of priests, Moses himself must relinquish the illusion that covenantal leadership rests on a single set of shoulders. Okay? So he says essentially that they have to, how do I say this? Like, so rather than having the single focal point on Moses, the idea is that this is distributed amongst the various elders. Rabbi Sachs, in talking about holiness, he says, what does it mean to be a holy nation? And part of what he brings out is the idea that in order for God to make room for people and for creation, that he has to, there's a perspective that says that God hides himself. He withdraws himself in order to make room for creation, for people, for all of this, and that then at some point he comes in and reveals himself a little bit more. But the idea is that he makes room for us by constraining himself. And that's part of what creation was not just the act of creating, but that God made room for creation. And that by every Shabbat, in turn, in response to this, we make room in time and in space for God himself. Okay? And so we withdraw ourselves. We stop working, we stop striving, we stop creating, because that's part of what it means to be in God's image, is to be created in God's image, as God is a creator, and he influences and he does things, he makes it happen, and so he gives this to us, this ability. And so we, in turn of him making space for us every Shabbat at least, we withdraw ourselves and we stop creating, we stop making, we stop striving, and we make room for God in space, or in time, right? And then, especially with the instance of the tabernacle, but also, around the world, there's thousands of places like this, shuls, temples, I would say even churches and synagogues that are making space in a place for God and his Spirit. So we have the time and the space together. And one of the things that I think that we see here in Moses with what he's doing is he's ultimately, we don't see the complete fulfillment here in him transferring this authority to the judges, but what we see is that he is ultimately abdicating the throne, if you will, to make space for God, because this would be a theocracy, right, where God is leading the people. So when the temple was taken, the conquerors marveled that the Holy of Holies was empty, right? And why? Because that was a place for God himself. And so the idea is that Moses is making space for God ultimately to show himself as the leader of Israel, rather than everybody looking to Moses, that God will speak to these other people. We see in I think it's Exodus 24, where the elders eat with a meal with God, and it says that they see God, and that they begin to prophesy, and that the Spirit of God is put on these people. So it does seem to me that that God approved of the leadership and the democratization and the delegation of authority, and that very thing is more of God's design than the single-focused top-down model. So what we see here is that this is, I think that Jethro's advice is inspired by God, and that it's moving Israel towards this theocracy, towards honoring God, and towards actually being a nation of priests, not just looking, oh, hey, they're the special one, they're the anointed ones. Like in this case, as Korah so eloquently put it, they're all anointed, they're all special. And so if you're going to create a nation of priests, you have to also delegate that authority and that responsibility, and this is the first step towards that. And Moses, in doing so, is creating space for people to approach God directly, which we see in the next chapters, and then the people respond in a certain way. But Moses is doing his job, I think, in stepping out of the way and pointing them towards Adonai directly.